Greatest of all time. That was something that I was hearing a lot of discussion about in the MMA circles coming to UFC 226. And after UFC 226, DC put himself on the pedestal in the discussion with 4 other dudes to be considered the greatest of all time. And I know a lot of people are saying, well, Chase, there's a lot of greats in MMA. And yes, I do agree. There is a lot of greats in MMA. I will not deny that there's a lot of great fighters. But when it comes down to it, you can take your Bibinos from 1FC and shove it. Your Mighty Mouses, your Jose Aldos, your Conor McGregors, your freaking Frankie Edgars, your BJ Penns, your Matt Hughes, Hoist Gracie, Chuck, Tito, Randy. Shove it. Because when you talk about greatest of all time in MMA, there's normally 5 dudes that get brought up. Daniel Cormier, who recently joined that list. Anderson the Spider Silva. Johnny Bones Jones. Georges Rush St. Pierre. And Fedor the Last Emperor Emelianenko. Those are the 5 dudes that get brought up when you talk about greatest of all time in MMA. No period questions of ask. Anytime you bring up like, hey, who do you think is the greatest fighter of all time? Like, easily, people will start saying Jon Jones. People will start saying GSP. Someone will be like, what about Anderson? And then someone will be like, what about Fedor? And then people will now say DC because of what he did. And when you look at DC's resume, minus Jon Jones, the one guy he couldn't overcome, he dominated the heavyweight division at Strikeforce. He dominated the heavyweight division for a little bit in UFC before going down to the premier division and the light heavyweight division and kicked some major ass over there. Has had many good fights in the light heavyweight division, especially one against Alexander Gustafsson and Dan Henderson. He's a tough dude, tough chin, very good fighter, moves up to heavyweight, takes on Stipe Miocic, who looked like an unstoppable force at that heavyweight division. Seemed like it was going to take a lot for someone to beat him and take away that title from him, and beats him in the first round, not just by submission or out wrestling him, but beats him by choking him out. I mean, when you look at DC's notable wins, you look at Stipe, Anderson Silva, Dan Henderson, what's his name, Antonio Bigfoot Silva. That was a big win for DC because a lot of people were high on Bigfoot after Bigfoot beat Fedor the weekend before, or not the weekend before, the event beforehand, and then DC comes along and everyone's like, who the fuck is this little fat dude? And then DC beats the fuck out of Silva, so that was a huge win for him. That was like the one that boosted up his career. Frank Mir. I mean, you look at some of the premier guys that DC has beat. It's a great list of guys. It's not like, oh man, this is some snubs. He's defended his light heavyweight title officially twice. 3 times actually. 3 times. Sorry, I always forget that the Volkan Ozdemir fight. I mean, it was a forgettable fight anyways. But he's defended his light heavyweight title 3 times. That's impressive. And now he's the heavyweight champion. And now he's considered in a big marquee match with Brock Lesnar in the near future. I mean, you have to be somewhat of a big deal, somewhat of a GOAT, if you're considered to be in a marquee matchup like that with Brock Lesnar. I know everyone's going to be like, well, Brock Lesnar's not really a GOAT himself. No, but when it comes to a money draw, it's not like Brock Lesnar's going to waste his time with some Joe Schmoes. He's either wasting his time with whoever's a champion, or he's wasting his time with people he considers are GOATs. And DC is not only just a champion, but he's also someone that a lot of people consider the GOAT. So is DC the GOAT? Well, let's look at the other contenders for the GOAT. You look at Fedor Emelianenko from the mid-2000s. The dude was dominating in Pride, having great wins over the Nogueira brothers and everything like that. Dude just looked like he couldn't be touched. He went on to Affliction, and he started his own promotion with M1 Global, and he was dominating fools there as well, like Andrei Arlovsky. I always remember Arlovsky charged at him, and Fedor with one punch knocked him out. He's kind of like the UFC fighter that got away, like the guy that always got away from the UFC. Like when it seemed so close that Fedor would be with the UFC, it just never seemed to happen. And even though, yes, it seemed like, oh, everything would work well with Fedor, Fedor kind of in the mid-2010s have fell off a little bit. He had that huge win over Brett the Grim Rogers, but then afterwards he got caught by Fabricio Werdum. Then later on, Antonio Silva kind of beat him up. Then Henderson hit him with the H-bomb. And it was just kind of like, man, what's going on with Fedor? And then Matt Mitrione beat him. I don't know. Fedor is just like the latter portion of his career. Like if you told people like, oh yeah, he's one of the greatest of all time, it's just kind of like hard to like for people to grasp that and understand, because you have to show them old Pride fights. You have to show them all that old stuff. It's kind of like, you know, me being a big WEC fan saying like, oh no, Uriah Faber used to be a beast. Go watch his WEC stuff and you'll see, you know, like it's kind of like Miguel Ángel Torres. It's like you got to go watch the older stuff to see the legit times of those fighters. And really, to be honest, if I always have to refer to the olden days with Fedor and Fedor's still fighting and the results don't match and we call him one of the greatest of all times, it kind of like makes it seem like that anyone who beats him is just all of a sudden like one of the greatest heavyweights. Like Matt Mitrione. I like Matt Meathead, but is he really one of the greatest like heavyweights out there? Freaking Fabricio Werdum. Yeah, I guess Fabricio Werdum is considered one of the greatest heavyweights, I guess, of all time. He's up there on the list with Kane and Stipe and DC. Yeah, I guess you can make that argument that he's a top 5 heavyweight of all time. And what the fuck is Antonio Bigfoot Silva, though? Like, that's the thing. It's like, when you look at Fedor post-career, it's just kind of like hard when you say, yeah, he's one of the greatest of all time. And it's just like he keeps losing some major fights. It's kind of hard. Now, Fedor is having a fight. He did just recently beat Frank Mir, and he's going to have a fight with Chael Sonnen soon. And that could lead him to becoming the Bellator heavyweight champion, which would help his stock. No doubt about it. It will help his stock because he hasn't been a champion for quite some time, Mr. Emelianenko. The last emperor needs some gold around that waist. And it could very well happen with this heavyweight Grand Prix with how everything's kind of playing out. But I'm just saying, when it comes down to it, Fedor has just been kind of hit or miss in the latter portion of his prime. Speaking of latter portions of career, Anderson Silva. Once the dominant fighter, 11 championship defenses, looked to make it 12, decided to dick around with Chris Weidman and paid the price. Went for the rematch, broke his leg against Chris Weidman. Afterwards faced Nick Diaz. Turned out that he had some dick drugs in his system. Then afterwards, he's been banned for a year. And I can honestly not tell you what happened with Anderson afterwards. He was kind of like dicking around, not really doing anything. You know, his most recent win was against like Corey Anderson. I can't even remember who the frick that he faced. I honestly cannot. Derek Brunson. Was it Derek Brunson? Was that the guy he beat? I think he beat Derek Brunson. And even then, some people thought Derek Brunson won that fight because all Anderson did was dick around. He didn't do anything, Silva. All he did was stood there and let Derek Brunson punch him. Then again, I did defend that and saying that's kind of impressive because, you know, Anderson's letting you hit him for free. But then again, you're letting someone tee off on you. I almost feel like Anderson kind of self-inflicts himself. Like, you know, if he wasn't really dicking around that much in the Bisping fight, maybe he would have beat Michael Bisping. And maybe Anderson would have beat the Who Cockhold. Who knows? It is what it is. But when you look at Anderson in his prime and his huge wins over like guys like Dan Henderson, Chael Sonnen, Vitor Belfort, you know, he beat Forrest Griffin. He's the former UFC light heavyweight champion, so might as well throw his name in there. He's beat Stephan Bonner. I mean, he's beaten a lot of really, really good guys. Avenged a loss against Yushin Okami that really shouldn't have been a loss anyways. Fought DC and lost, but hey, he still went up there and weighed and fought DC. 1 point undefeated at the light heavyweight division. So when you look at this Anderson Silva and you look at how skilled he was and everything like that, a lot of people consider him a GOAT. Heck, he has some defining moments in MMA history. The last second triangle choke on Chael Sonnen. That's something where everyone says, oh my God, I can't believe Anderson Silva pulled that off. The front kick to the face to Vitor Belfort. Now, sure, a lot of people like to blemish it and say, oh, well, you know, Anderson, he could have been on steroids. He's a big cheetah, as Michael Bisping was saying the whole time. But really, to be honest, did he get popped when he fought DC for USADA? Sure, Anderson Silva in recent fight attempts against guys like Kelvin Gastelum and Uriah Hall, he's had some health / getting popped for USADA issues. But really, to be honest, I don't think Anderson Silva, that doesn't really tarnish like his legacy to the point where it's just like, oh, I wouldn't consider him the GOAT. Because when Anderson Silva was in his prime and he was dominating fools, that was some of the best time to watch. But it's just kind of like the Fedor effect, as I said now, the latter portion of Silva's prime career. It's just kind of like people are beating him and he's not really trying and he's not really as active as you thought he would be. And it's just like, is he really the GOAT? But he did stand his ground against DC. And remember, when they did have the stand-up exchanges against Daniel Cormier almost got rocked by one Anderson Silva fighting on 2 days' notice, eating pizza and ice cream. Georges Rush St. Pierre. I mean, when you look at it, his 2 blemishes are in the UFC, and they're historic blemishes. Getting choked out by Matt Hughes, armbar by Matt Hughes in the last second of the first round, tapping out there. Giving up one of the biggest upsets in UFC history with Matt Serra knocking him out. I mean, they're big losses that people remember, but don't forget that when he got those rematches, he dominated Matt Hughes in the second fight, and he made Matt Serra look like he never fought in their second fight. So when you look at that right there, GSP, legit dude when it comes down to it. He's a 2-time welterweight champion, 1-time UFC middleweight champion, beat Michael Bisping. Michael Bisping beat Anderson Silva. GSP beat Michael Bisping. I don't know if that makes GSP better than Silva, but you go based off that, I guess. Beat Michael Bisping, who's a UFC Hall of Famer, whether you like him or not. Beat guys like Johnny Hendricks. You know, that's always a touchy subject for Hendricks fans. Guys like Nick Diaz. Never really lost many rounds as on top. You know, the only round I can think of that he lost was the 3rd round to Josh Koscheck, the 2nd round to Jake Shields, and 2 rounds to Johnny Hendricks. Yeah, that's right. I had GSP winning that fight. I know, I'm going to get hate anyways, but whatever. When you look at it, GSP has that GOAT mentality. But what kind of hurts GSP in the GOAT discussion is him retiring so young. Where he just decided, you know, he had so much more prime left in him. And that awkward press conference where Dana White was telling us, GSP is not going to be there. And then GSP comes in all busted up saying, I'm here. I'll answer any of y'all questions. And he was stuttering during all of it. And he was saying that he had to take a break and everything. And then it was just kind of like he was gone. Then we were seeing GSP bulk up. And we're like, whoa, what the heck's going on? He looks better than when he was fighting. Then we heard that he was going to return, and he was telling us that MMA is like a stock market. It was going on this weird tangents, how he picks and chooses his opponents. He was going to fight Bisping, then they weren't going to fight Bisping, and then he was going to fight Tyron Woodley, but then he was going to fight Bisping again. I don't know. So it's kind of like when you look at GSP, it's kind of like when you look at his initial run with the UFC, dominant guy, beat guys like BJ Penn and everything like that. BJ Penn twice. And then you just go ahead and then you look at the post-UFC Georges St. Pierre, where his movie career didn't really kick off like he thought he would. He didn't transition into the mainstream world that like he thought he would. And then he goes back to the UFC, has one middleweight championship fight with Michael Bisping, who a lot of hardcore fans were saying he was the weaker fighter anyways, because there's dudes like Yoel Romero and Robert Whittaker and everything like that that could go over there and beat his ass. And then all of a sudden GSP, he wins the belt, and he's supposed to fight Bobby Knuckles, and then he's like, I have ulcerative colitis, I can't fight anymore. So it's kind of like with GSP, record-wise, accomplishment-wise, statistic-wise, and all these other stats that you want to throw, you could make the case he's the greatest of all time. But at the same time, you look at, stuff he's done outside of the octagon, and it kind of hurts people, and especially the whole... He's been not wanting to fight Anderson in the mega fight or the super fight for so many years. A lot of people believe that was more of George's camp, not really wanting to fight. It is what it is. That's what some people have said. And then he also has that weird Vaseline gate with BJ Penn, where BJ Penn thought he was Vaselining up during the fight. So you have to wait and see about that one. So, well, that one's an old news, but you have to that's up for debate. And then we get to DC's main rival, Jon Jones. When you think about Jon Jones, you always say to yourself, self-inflicting. Because other than the stuff that he's done outside the cage and the failed USADA test and everything like that, Jon Jones, hands down, dominant. And I hate that there's this MMA narrative that the media and DC has spun that DC has never lost. DC, your record is 22 wins, 1 loss, 1 no contest. Not 22 wins, 0 losses, and 2 no contests. You lost to a coked up Jon Jones. Deal with it. Jon Jones was snorting coke lines and he kicked your ass. For 4 rounds straight, he kicked your ass and he let you have the 5th round because he felt bad for you. Deal with it. Enough with this all. DC's never lost. Jon Jones has been cheating his whole career. Oh, blah, 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 blah. First of all, too, this is where also the media has not really educated sports fans on steroids or anything like that. Not every steroid you take is a performance enhancer. I know that confuses people, but there's sometimes steroids that help recovery, and there's sometimes steroids that help with the body. And the steroid that Jon Jones was doing was to help with those damn biceps. Ain't no damn performance enhancer. And the steroid that he did get caught with, that steroid literally has no effect in a fight whatsoever because it's just there to help pump up those biceps. You know, that's how Jon Jones was wearing tank tops more often during that thing because he wanted everyone to know that he's been making those biceps work a little bit. That steroid that Jon Jones got caught with, not really a performance enhancer, but it is a steroid nonetheless, and USADA thinks every steroid is bad because that's just how USADA works. I don't know. That's your system. I think it's weird, but hey, it is what it is. So when it comes down to it, you look at Jon Jones and you say, well, he's beat DC not once on cocaine, but twice. Is he the greatest of all time? I mean, if Jon Jones kept his head on straight, this dude right here, he could be considered the one facing Brock Lesnar. Heck, Brock Lesnar wanted to face him with no belt, just wanted to face this young kid in a fight. That was going to be the next mega fight for Jon Jones. So who is the greatest of all time? I really want to know. I really want to hear what you guys think of who the greatest of all time is. Someone's going to ask me, Chase, who do you think the greatest of all time is? Look, I'm biased as hell. I'll admit that 100%. I still got Anderson Silva as the greatest of all time. Yeah, DC's been impressive. Yeah, Jon Jones. GSP's my number 2. Fedor, he's like my number 3. Jon Jones, I feel like his chapter is not over yet. And that's when I feel like when I see what the end of the road of his chapter's like, that's when I'll say if he's the greatest of all time. DC, it's same thing with Tim. I feel like his book is still kind of been written. I know everyone's saying he wants to retire next March. I don't think he's going to retire next March. I think the money's too nice for him to retire, but I think that he's going to be having good opportunities ahead of him moving forward. Whether that be against, he's going to be facing Brock Lesnar. But whether he faces Jones again, that's another thing to kind of look at because I would kind of want to see him face Jones a 3rd time to see if he could actually beat Jon Jones. So really, to be honest here, Anderson Silva, I always felt like he kind of cost himself the middleweight title. The 2nd time was just a bad luck type of thing. Chris Weidman just checked the kick really well. His fight against Nick Diaz, he got caught for dick drugs. He fucked around with Michael Bisping and he beat Derek Brunson or Corey Anderson, whichever one. I don't remember who the fuck it was. All I remember that fight, he didn't come out to Ain't No Sunshine. He came out to one of his kids' songs and it sucked. It was terrible. But I still consider Anderson the greatest of all time. But who do you guys consider the GOAT? And if it's not one of the 5 guys, if you do consider DJ or Jose Aldo or Matt Hughes, Royce Gracie, Randy Couture, Dan Henderson, Chuck Liddell, Tito Ortiz, or BB Bino, or any other fighter out there that you consider the greatest of all time, let me know why in the comment section. Don't just say, I consider him the greatest, without giving any context, because those kind of comments suck, and I like to get discussion going. So anyways, let me know who you guys think is the greatest of all time. Is DC the GOAT? Leave it down below. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. It was kind of fun actually talking about MMA for a change.